Or donuts.
Is that not gonna?
Come on.
Hello.
Hello. It wants me to keep our device upright.
Amy and Ben, hello. We're live.
Hey, Bailey.
Hi.
Hey.
Hey guys.
We're live. And we have some folks with us.
Awesome.
Your pal Sam McLaughlin is here. We're ready for some pickles.
Say again.
We've never done Facebook Live, so we're just making sure that we got it.
It looks good to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can pretty
You
much
can hear?
for the most part.
There we are.
It's a little muffled.
Okay. I bet if I do that, it'll be better.
Yes, these are all new. This is all new technology. We're just, you guys are our guinea pigs once again, but welcome back to Real Good Kitchen Cooking School. We're super excited to have you guys again. And today we're going to learn about pickles and ferments. I know. I just want to say a quick thing. I'll introduce myself. I'm Bailey Foster. I am the founder of Real Good Kitchen, which is a shared kitchen community. We're opening a facility on Magnolia this fall. And in the meantime, we are sponsoring these RGK cooking school episodes. Last month we were on Instagram Live, and this month we're checking out Facebook and our friends over here. And Amy and Ben have been wonderful to come back again and work with us for a second time. We are taking donations. We've been supporting food industry professionals, and we'll continue to compensate the folks who are teaching us during these classes. But this month, we're also going to focus on donating to food access groups. So anyone who feels able to donate, we really appreciate it. You can do that on our website, therealgoodkitchen.com. There's a big orange button up in the right-hand corner. And today we'll also be raffling off 2 pickle kits. Ben and Amy will put together recipes, spices, and containers. You just need to add the great seasonal vegetables, and we'll be raffling those off. We'll put details on our social media later on today, but anybody who feels able to contribute $10 or more will be entered in that raffle, and we will announce the winner tomorrow, I would think, or soon, in the next couple of days. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Amy and Ben Willis-Becker, tell us just a couple things about yourselves, and then let's go. And anybody watching, please put questions in the chat. I will do my best to get them answered. So go. Hi.
A couple things about us. Hi, how are you, everybody? Thanks for joining us. Like Bailey said, we're Ben and Amy. We're both from Knoxville. We have 2 kids, 2 dogs, and a cat. And we love to cook even when we aren't doing it at our jobs, if we have jobs, or when we have jobs. Anyway, that's besides the point. So today we're going to do a couple different varieties of pickles. We're going to do quick pickles, cold brined, and hot brined. And the difference between the two is they're pretty similar. It's just the method. And then we'll do sauerkraut. So for us, we generally don't add a culture to our sauerkraut. The vegetables have different bacteria on them. And then we also use sea salt, which you don't have to use, but that just promotes a little bit more of the lactobacillus, the culture that you need to create the sourness in sauerkraut. But like I said, the vegetables that we have, all vegetables have those bacteria on them already, so you don't have to add a culture. A lot of people add a culture because they want a specific flavor. So different lactobacteria would have create different flavors in the product. So if you wanted to produce a product that was very consistent, then you would possibly want to use a culture. That way you knew exactly what type of bacteria that you were going to have to promote what sour flavor that you're going to get out of it. So
Super. So can you essentially, I mean, most vegetables, most hard vegetables, could be pickled or could be fermented, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Maybe not lettuces, but carrots, other kinds of hardy greens.
Yeah, we've done kale before for our kimchi. You could put it in the sauerkraut, but the hard thing about even the hardier greens is there's not a ton of moisture in the product. So the other thing that we do when we make it is we don't add any water.
Just salt.
We just have the salt pull. We'll show you here in a couple minutes, but we massage the vegetables so that with the salt, so the salt pulls the natural moisture from the vegetables out, and then you press it really pretty hard until the natural vegetables cover the product so that it doesn't oxidize.
Right.
And then you let it sit.
So let's see the process.
So with that said, here's our sauerkraut. We've done most of the prep. So the fun part here is to massage it. But I'll talk you through what we do, what we've done so far. So in this container we have sauerkraut, carrots, garlic, and some dill. Like we were talking about, you can ferment, pickle anything pretty much. We'll talk about that more specifically with each process. So we take that product, all the product that we're using, and we weigh it. And then we add 1 tablespoon of salt per pound of product. So we have product in here. It was about 4 pounds and 13 ounces. So I put the salt in it accordingly, and now I'm going to massage it. So as you see now, it's pretty much all just raw vegetables, and the salt is sitting here. So clean, nice, clean pan. Obviously, all of this needs to be thoughtfully cured, and you make sure you don't have to wear gloves, but you want to make sure your hands are very clean. And so I took this container out of the garage and washed the container really well before we started using it. And now you just want to, it's not a ton of salt for the amount of veg you have, so you really have to work it in there and massage it for, I don't know, we'll see how long it takes today. Probably about 5 minutes.
So you said, I'm sorry, just to get the ratios again, you said 1 tablespoon of salt per 1 pound of vegetables. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so you have about 1/4 cup of salt in that container.
Yes.
So what does it feel like right now, Ben? Is it starting to get sort of slimy?
Yeah, you can kind of see it's starting to get a little bit more translucent.
Right?
And yeah, you can definitely feel the moisture. Like my hands weren't real wet before, and now they're pretty wet.
Okay. So you're just really massaging the salt in and squeezing hard. It looks
So it's fun. We just wrote the recipes earlier, and Amy mentioned, working the muscles a little bit. So it's a lot like kneading dough. Similar action, except I'm squeezing a little bit more with my hands. And I've had people do this before at other jobs that I've had. A lot of times they're afraid to really squeeze it and work it. But in order to get the liquid, the natural juices to come out, you really have to squeeze the product.
So you're trying to get enough liquid out of that cabbage and carrots to cover the solids, right?
Say again?
You're trying to get enough liquid out of those vegetables to cover the solids.
Yeah,
Correct.
to cover the whole product.
So
Wow.
now you can start to see, maybe in the picture, you can start seeing a little bit liquid in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like, you can see we didn't add anything else. So I'll massage it a little bit more and then we'll go to press it, which that's another not necessarily tricky part, but you have to be real diligent about it. If you don't press it and make sure that it's covered with the liquid overnight, the top layer will start to oxidize and start to rot a little bit. And then the process, like you can still save it and come up with a good product, but it's not obviously not ideal.
Right.
So I'm feeling this, I can squeeze the cabbage and the carrots and whatnot product and feel the juices squeeze out of it. So I'm going to transfer it to a different container.
So if this could be done with a much smaller volume of vegetables too, right?
Say again.
This could be done with a much smaller volume of vegetables, a pound or
This is just 2 heads of cabbage.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you'll see this will probably this will make about probably 3 or 4 loose quarts of sauerkraut.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on, since it takes, the way we usually do it is on the counter, since it takes so long to do it, we usually do a pretty good amount because we tend to eat a good amount of it. So now we have a container that fits in, but you can press it. And I think this container isn't going to be.
Big enough.
There's not enough product in it to squeeze it. Maybe. So you can see now the vegetable is covered with the water.
Wow.
So you can see that liquid, and I'm just squeezing it. So now we're going to pour water into this container. You can also put other things in there, something obviously heavy. Water's pretty heavy. It weighs a pound per every pint. But if you have limited access to the water, you could stack cans or bricks or beans or whatever you have. So that's still not pressing it quite enough, so I'm going to add more water.
So you're trying to get the kraut liquid, the vegetable liquid, above the line of sight, right?
Yeah, above the vegetables, the
Right.
product. That way, it stops oxidation, basically.
It's like a seal to keep it fresh underneath.
Gotcha. So Ben and Amy, I think we have our first international guest on our RGK cooking school. Your friend Alistair is tuning in from Scotland.
Oh, nice. Hey, what's up, Allie?
Hey, Allie.
It's been a long time. Allie went to culinary school. We went to culinary school together.
Yeah.
Very cool. Great to have you.
Good, buddy.
Yes, absolutely.
So can we just review again what you have in there besides cabbage? It looks like cabbage and carrots, and then was there something green in there as well?
Some dill and a little bit of sliced garlic.
Great. It's delicious.
So we did sliced garlic because, as probably most of you know, garlic takes on many forms depending on how you just cut it. When you just slice it, it's not as bitter and pungent, generally speaking. So that's why we chose to slice it as opposed to mincing it, which the more you cut it, the more bitter and pungent it's going to be. So now you can see the water is covering the product.
Come on, clean up.
And so now we'll take a label, because it's important too to remember to know when your product started. So we have a label here. We'll put it aside.
So, what's the ideal sort of environment for your sauerkraut to rest in? Because it has to rest for a pretty significant period of time, right?
Yeah, I usually go 3 to 4 weeks.
3 to 4 weeks.
So cool, dark place, ideally.
Cool, dark place. So not in the middle of your hot kitchen, maybe?
No, we kind of have a spot over here that's not ideal. We keep other ferments. We have a bunch of kombucha going over here.
It's not ideal though. You do the
It's
best.
not ideal, but you know, it's cooler and darkish.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the other option is like for us would be in a basement, but there's other, you know, like dust issues and things that. So this is a little bit more controlled than other spaces in the house.
Gotcha. So it's a cool, dry, dark space, but you're leaving it uncovered except for the water, right?
Yeah, you
Except
want
for
it
the water.
to breathe.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
So not where your dogs are or anything
So
like that.
then the last thing with the crowd is you want to be pretty diligent on checking it daily basis, more or less, making sure you'll see at the top here. Sometimes there will be a little bit of scum, and it'll float to the top. And so if that happens, you'll take the press off. You know, it's pretty messy, but there are lots of ways to, you know, grab a sheet tray or something to rest it on, and then skim the scum off. Sometimes the scum will stick to the edges or around the container. If that happens, if it's on the top container, pour the water out and scrub it, wash it, and put it back on after you rinsed it and all that work. Put the water back in there and make sure it's pressed again.
So anything that's looking kind of grungy, you need to get rid of.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the cleaner, the better. Definitely. So make sure that the vegetables are all washed really well, and hands and all the containers.
And then after this 3 to 4 week curing process, is that what we would call it? Fermentation process?
Yes.
Then you decant it into glass jars.
Yeah, so we have a couple. Here's a jar here with dill seed kraut.
Beautiful.
So yeah, that batch that we have will fill up a jar just like that.
Gotcha. And so, how do you know when it's ready to put in jars?
I taste it. We usually taste it along the process, which is a good idea. Anytime, you know, you're curious, maybe every couple days if it's your first time. If you've made it before, or you want to wait a little bit longer, every week or so, just taste it. You'll notice the flavor changing. You'll notice it gets more funky as it goes on.
Right.
More, you know, the lactic acids start to come out and break the sauerkraut down.
Okay. So it gets softer and more sort of funky as it ages.
Yeah, but ideally it still keeps its crunch.
Got it. So how long can it keep in the fridge?
I mean, a long time. We have caraway kraut in here that we made on March 22nd. And the only thing really is like sometimes the top layer, if it is not covered with liquid over time, you know, I mean, that's been in there for a good 2 weeks and we haven't really touched it.
Right.
But you can tell the top layer is starting to get a little bit less than ideal. So another thing you can do, because the water ends up being about a 2% solution, salt to water, so 2% being salt.
Right.
Brine. So you could make a little bit of that and then pour it in to cover.
Oh, I see. So you can make.
You're not diluting the flavor or anything like that. You're not adding, too much or too little. What liquid that is.
So cabbage and carrots. What are the other best vegetables that you recommend for this kind of cold kraut making process?
Kohlrabi would be really good.
Mhm.
Beets would be really good. Fennel, I think, would be really nice.
Fennel probably wouldn't take as long as the heartier vegetables, but fennel would be delicious.
And we've done onions before, or I've done onions before, and they're a little pungent for us because they start to get that allium kind of flavor dominates everything after a couple days. So I tend to leave onions out of sauerkraut.
Got it.
But do put green onions in kimchi.
Sounds delicious. You're not going to show us kimchi today, though, right?
Not today.
You'll have to come back another time and do that.
We can do a whole class.
Yeah, we'll do a whole class.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Let's do it.
Okay, cool.
Just a reminder, you can find, well, maybe not yet, but at least by later tonight or tomorrow, you can find the kraut and pickles recipe on our website. And we're raising money to support folks like Ben and Amy who are conducting these classes, as well as for food access groups this month. So you can donate at realgoodkitchen.com. All right, what do we have next?
All right, so next we'll do the bread and butter pickles. So this is just our variety of hot brine pickles. So we talked about cold brine, hot brine. The real difference, as you'll see, is the method, as I said. So hot brine, we bring the brine up to a boil. If you have pickling spice or any type of spice that's whole, like today we have some mustard seed in there, but things like cinnamon or star anise or allspice or clove, if you had, or dill seed, anything that's whole. When we bring the brine up initially, you want to make sure the sugar and salt get dissolved off the bottom. So I usually whisk that to get it to dissolve. And then once it comes to a boil, turn it off and let the spices steep for 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're ready to go. So this process today that we're doing with the cucumbers, we slice the cucumbers on a mandolin. You don't have to use a mandolin. And we added a little onions, and then we salted them about an hour ago. So we let the salt draw a little bit of the moisture out of the cucumber. So you can see there's a lot of water in that bowl.
Well,
So
how
now
do you slice those?
We're going to strain. Sorry about that. We're going to strain the product. And then we're going to rinse the salt. We're going to rinse the salt off of the product. So I choose, when I do this, I put the bowl underneath the strainer. And so I'm straining the cucumbers. But if you just let all the water fall through, it will take a really long time to strain them really well. So much like when you're washing any greens or herbs, aside from very delicate herbs. So I let the water fill it up, and they almost submerge in the liquid. And now I'll strain them, and I'll do that once more. That way there's not too much salt. So with this brine, as we're making the pickles, I did not add salt to this brine because we're salting the product.
Got it. So will you hold up a pickle and show us how thick it is? How thick
Yeah.
a cucumber? So how?
About 1/8 of an inch.
1/8 of an inch.
1/8 to 1/4. Some people like their bread and butter pickles cut a little thicker than others.
Right. An eighth to a quarter, and you've salted the pickles the cucumbers and the onions.
Yes. About
And
an hour ago.
an hour ago. And what do you have in your brine? You have some sort of vinegar, I assume?
So brine, in this brine, apple cider vinegar, brown sugar, turmeric, celery seed, mustard seed, no salt, like I said.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's about it. I said
So,
turmeric, mustard.
Sarah McLucky is asking about spicy bread and butter, Ben. What are your thoughts on that?
That'd be delicious. All for it.
Agreed.
If I were to do that, I would probably not change much as far as the spice or the sweet, sour, salty goes. I would just add some chilies to it.
Right.
And in this case, you add whatever, dry, canned, chipotles, fresh, sliced, whatever you prefer.
Great.
So now we're gonna let these cucumbers strain a little bit. And then we have 2 containers here. You got the half measuring cup out.
Yeah.
And we're gonna fill these containers with cucumbers and onions.
Can you guys see okay, Bailey?
Yes, you can see. I can't tell. Are those quart jars or smaller?
Quart.
Quart.
Yes. Whoops. So you want to pack the product in pretty good. It's cucumbers, so they're fairly delicate, so keep that in mind.
So you're just leaving a little room at the top for the brine to cover.
Yes. But it will, these aren't super packed, so you can see already, I just tamp that down a little bit. So once we put the brine in, there will be a little more room on the top, usually to fill it with a little more product.
Right.
So now this brine is nice and hot. Make sure you stir it around a little bit. And when you have pickles in a container like this or any product and you pour a hot liquid, if I just dump this in here really fast, it will overflow because it takes a minute to find all the nooks and crannies in there.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have these cool things called pickle pebbles.
Pickle pebbles.
It's basically a glass weight. So you take these and you set it right in the jar. You can press it down.
Very cool.
And now your product is submerged. So today's our lucky day. We have another one in here.
I wonder what you could use.
So we can act like we know what we're doing, kind of.
I wonder what you could use if you didn't have a pickle pebble around.
Yeah, right.
Another jar, maybe, the way you did with the crab?
We use smaller
we
jars.
use all kinds of stuff. get
anything that you can.
Yeah, we could use like a ramekin. That's a tough thing
Like a
with
jelly
like
jar.
smaller jars. Perfect, really.
Right. But the important thing is, again, just to get all the vegetables submerged, right, under the liquid.
Yeah, and with this, like, if they're not totally submerged, it's not the end of the world, so to speak. You like say, I could pour this off and show you. Like, see right there. There's a pickle that's not totally submerged, or a cucumber that's not totally submerged right here.
Yes.
I don't know if you can see that.
Mm-hmm.
This one right there.
Yes.
So if I were to put the lid on, it would still be flavorful because we're not fermenting these pickles.
They're gonna go in the fridge.
So it's not as like with the fermentation. It's part of the process is covering them all the way, but these need to be covered. But if they're floating around a little bit, it's okay.
So we forgot. Oops. We forgot to talk about any sterilization that you need to do to the jars beforehand, Ben. I think these are
Yes,
going to
correct.
turn into refrigerator pickles, right? So.
Right, these are refrigerator pickles. So I don't boil these. If I'm gonna give them away or let them sit on the counter or put them in the pantry at room temperature, then I would go through the process. I would boil them to sanitize them, make sure that the utensils you're using are all sanitized, and then jar it and process it properly. But for this, we're just making these and putting them in the fridge. So we can do it just like this. I took these. They had been washed, but I always, they sit in the cupboard, and so I always pull them out and wash them if I'm making pickles or fermenting anything, just because ideally they're as clean as possible. And sometimes sitting there, it'll get a little dust in it. So I don't always do that, like if I make a soup and put it into the container. But
So you just wash the jars again and use them as they were. Didn't worry too much. Didn't worry about sterilization.
correct. Did not sterilize.
Great. That's easier.
Yes. All right.
We're also getting lots of comments about Bernie being there with you.
Oh yeah. Bernie's here with us.
Bernie's
always.
here. He's your spirit animal.
Yeah.
So you've got your pickle. What are they called? Pickle weights.
Yeah. Pickle pebbles.
Pickle pebbles in there.
Yes.
Submerged.
That's the technical term. And if anybody's wondering what's in these jars, it's not wine. It is beet ginger kombucha. So hopefully one day we will be selling that with our plethora of other things we sell for H&L Pickles and Ferments.
Yes. You should say a little bit about H&L Pickles and Ferments if you like.
Okay. We are starting a company called H&L Pickles and Ferments. We are going to be operating out of the Real Good Kitchen. We are teaming with farmers locally. Specifically, we met with John Ledbetter at Hines Valley Farm to talk about products that he could
Very cool.
give us and what we would want and whatnot. And that was a great conversation, and using as many other local farmers as possible to create the product. We'll have a wide variety of things. We'll have different types of sauerkraut, different types of kimchi, all different types of pickles, other fermented products. We've been making for the past 4 years a product. It's a fermented eggplant, a Syrian dish called makdous, and it's you boil the eggplant till it's just tender. Then you slit it, smear it with like a cilantro walnut schmear, some pomegranates. Then you stack it in a container and cover it with olive oil and let it ferment. after 5 days, it's ready to eat and it's delicious, and it gets better as the year goes on. And we have been making it, and I've been getting product from John because usually every summer he calls and says he has like eggplant coming out of his ears, and so we
And
get,
those German eggplants he grows are amazing.
yeah, absolutely. We get like I don't know, a lot, and then we make it. So we have the product for at least a year, and it's really good a year later.
That is.
It's really good a year and a half later, and it's really good for your belly.
Well, we can't wait for H&L's Pickles and Ferments. It's going to be a beautiful thing.
Awesome. We are very excited.
So yeah,
Go
to
ahead.
finish up. No, I was going to say, to finish up these pickles, let's,
Okay.
what
So
do we do?
yeah, the bread and butters are pretty much done. We have a little bit to put in another jar, but we can do that afterwards. We don't need to waste your guys' time by seeing us put cucumbers in a jar. So we'll start working on the cold brine pickles.
Okay.
You'll see the difference. So we've made the brine. We're doing pickled fennel today. You can add lots of other things to this, seasonings, mustard seed, coriander, whatever you like. We like to keep our pickled fennel pretty simple. So I like to use rice wine vinegar because it's a delicate product. So for me, like an apple cider vinegar, a sherry vinegar would tend to overpower the flavor of the fennel because it's delicate. So that's like kind of my thought process in using a more delicate vinegar like a rice wine vinegar.
I'm sure you could do a whole class on vinegars and alone.
Yeah, there's a ton out there. There's drinking vinegars nowadays, and yeah, all kinds of stuff. So we did a little bit of sugar, rice wine vinegar, and a little bit of salt. So it's a simple brine. Brought it up to a boil till the salt and sugar dissolve. And then the big difference is, so we're thinking about the product too, the difference in product. Like usually a hot brine, sorry to get on a little tangent, but a hot brine pickle is usually for me is like a beet or a heartier vegetable, so a denser vegetable. So like if you were to hot brine fennel, it would pretty much turn to mush, and I wouldn't probably care for it very much. So cold brine is great for fennel, for other vegetables like pickled daikon. You could use kohlrabi, sugar snap peas. You could do radishes. Shaved radishes.
So you're thinking about texture is really a lot of what you're thinking about here too.
Yeah, texture, and yes, so that's the density a lot of times. So, more delicate vegetables, I like a little more crispy. So that's why I do a cold brine.
Got it. Yeah, it sounds great.
Yes. So you take the brine, as I said, dissolve the sugar and salt, and now you put it and get it ice cold. So I took that brine and put it in the freezer. I didn't pour it in the freezer, but obviously. So vinegar is more viscous than water, so in the freezer it's not going to totally solidify, but you can see there's some ice crystals on it.
How long has that been in the freezer?
Probably about, I think I made it about 4:30, so about an hour and a half. So it doesn't have to be quite this cold, but that's perfect. So now we're going to take the brine. So here's the fennel. So the fennel, I cleaned it already. I pulled a layer off that was a little brown on the outside. And I'm going to trim a little bit more of the top off. The top strands tend to be pretty stringy, and they get less flavorful as you move up. A little and more bitter as there's more green. So with the fennel, we like to shave it pretty thin. So we use a mandolin, So I'm loosening the screw on the back. You can buy these like at Sunrise Market or any Asian market. We prefer the Japanese mandolin to the French steel mandolin.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna take a little bit of fennel and shave it and see if it's my desired thickness. So that's a little bit less than 1/8 of an inch, and that's a little thick for my taste.
Okay.
So I'm gonna crank it down a little bit. And now, see, that's a little bit thinner, but it's still a little bit thick for me. So on this mandolin, it's pretty much just barely turned so that you can get a product through it. So it's pretty thin. You can see it's a lot more see-through
Mm-hmm.
than the other one.
So for a delicate product like
What's that?
this, I was going to say, do you feel like a mandolin is sort of a mandatory tool for a delicate product like this?
And if you have awesome knife skills, then yeah, totally, you can rock it with a knife.
Right.
But if not, then yeah, mandolin's gonna be your friend.
Cool.
The only thing, the mandolin is not your friend when a vegetable or when your finger gets in the way of the blade.
Absolutely.
So whenever you're holding the vegetable, I always try to like tuck my fingers in.
Mm-hmm.
So like when you're learning knife skills, you're always taught to like make a claw and tuck your fingers underneath so that if you slip, you're not gonna hit your fingers. So much the same. If I slip, then if I'm keeping my fingers tucked up, then it's generally not going to cut you. So the other thing you don't want to do here is drag the heel of your hand.
Right.
That happens a lot to where you're so intently watching the vegetable and how you slice it that your heel of the hand dips down, and then yeah, that's not fun at all. No cut on a mandolin is fun.
No.
So ideally, if you have access to a cut glove, which I don't think we have one. So I'm going pretty slow. As I go down, I'm now just holding on to the very to the root of the vegetable, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So continuing as I go to choke my fingers up, turn it around if it gets a little uneven. And then I'm sure some chef that I worked for along the way had this phrase, but I picked it up from them, whoever it was, give credit where it's due. But when I get to about here, like, we don't need heroes, right? I would much rather like save this for a stock and cut it with a knife than have my hand slit open. Especially like now, there's no reason to give healthcare workers more things to work on. So just keep it safe. Keep it safe. Not to all the healthcare workers out there.
So Ben, just give us a quick second on why the Japanese mandolin is preferable to the French. More flex.
One is the price.
Yeah.
First of all, and then second, I find these, even though they're plastic and not steel, to be a little more durable.
Mm.
They're easier to use and put together, and they're way cheaper than a French mandolin. I think these are. This one was $29.99 at Sunrise Market.
That sounds perfect. Here can probably be found online as well.
Yeah, exactly. So this, the longer the fennel or whatever product you're pickling, since it's not a hot brine, it takes a little bit longer to marry the flavors into the vegetable, so for the vinegar to get in the pores. So again, I'm going to stop about right there.
Thank you. don't have to send an emergency vehicle to your home.
So the great thing, the thing that I think I like most about the cold brine is the vegetable is essentially raw when you eat it still. So it's nice and crispy, but it still has the nice vinegar, a little sweetness, and then the salt kind of brings the vegetable out. So that's another reason why we keep it simple with fennel, because we'll be able to taste the vinegar, the sour, the sweet, the salty. We'll still be able to taste the fennel and the nice crunch.
I want to eat that right now. It just sounds and looks so delicious. So Sarah asks, if you were using green beans or sugar snaps, would you blanch them at all first?
Yeah, I would blanch them first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's another class on how to properly blanch vegetables.
We're here for it, Ben.
Yeah, I'm just. All right, so I just mix these around. Ideally, you're putting a weight on here, but it's not essential by any means. So for me, we'll probably put a little bit of saran wrap right on top of the fennel and then cover it and put it in the fridge.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Oops. And that'll last in the fridge for several weeks as well.
I mean, indefinitely. Like
Yeah.
we used to make it when I was at Scripps, and we would use it on something and have a little bit left over, and 2 months later, there'd still that would still be there. We'd make a little bit more to have enough, but we would incorporate that as well.
I know I've had pickles in the back of my fridge for long periods of time.
Yes. Yeah. If it's if you're adding water to dilute the vinegar, then it's gonna last a little bit. The duration or length of time it'll be good is less, because the vinegar is going to keep it
Pressure.
help keep the vegetable for longer. Yes, correct.
Beautiful.
Cool. Are there any more questions out there?
I don't see any more questions, though I do see some requests for international deliveries, samples.
Nice. Yeah, definitely. Ideally, I think we're initially, I mean, you never know due to the times that we're in. Our business model has definitely changed from what it was months ago when we thought we would have a booth at the market. But ideally, we won't start the process with a website, but that ideally we will move into that. So essentially, we would have it available for, I mean, I'm sure we'll have to work out specifics with customs and all that, but
Great.
yeah, that's intentional. And our intention is to have a website where you can order product.
Fantastic. Well, in the meantime, we can get anybody who'd like a pickle making kit minus the vegetables. Donate $10 or more at therealgoodkitchen.com, and those funds will support folks like Ben and Amy who are doing these classes, as well as food access groups working around Knoxville to make sure people are getting the food that they need. You can find the recipes on our website as well, and
we'll try to figure out how to post them to at least our Facebook, maybe.
Yes,
we'll talk about that.
This video too will get posted to Facebook afterwards, which is great. We weren't able to preserve your last one, but we will have this if anybody wants to refer back. And thank you guys for coming again. Alan Schwartz would like for you to come to their kitchen and teach a class. So
okay, nice. One more thing about the recipes.
Yes.
So we put in there like general brines for vegetables. So when you're making your pickle, think about like the sweetness of the vegetable, So the sweeter the vegetable, the less sugar you'll add. And again, if on top of that, if you like a sweeter pickle, add a little more sugar. If you like a tartar pickle, add less sugar. And so we try to put guidelines in there so you could kind of play with them and learn as you go.
Perfect. And same with the spices, right? You're sort of, do you have a ballpark of spice ratios? I guess different ones.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like, anything like a warm spice, like allspice, clove, cinnamon, nutmeg. I would, heat, maybe not heat nutmeg, but the other ones at very small amounts because they will bloom and overpower. So think of the pungency of the spice, and then if it's a powder form, it's going to be a little bit more bitter and a little bit stronger flavor than the whole form would be.
Right. Cool.
Yeah, so I think I would say like per quart of brine, I would add like a quarter cup of pickling spice.
Mm-hmm. All together.
That would be like a mixture of total spices.
Right. Very good. All right. Well, pickling kits to come, raffle details to come from all who donate $10 or more. And thank you guys so much again. And
thank you.
We'll hope to see you again soon.
Definitely.
And thanks to everybody who attended. Great to see you all. And we'll see
Thank you all for attending.
Back here next week for another episode of RGK Cooking School. Take care.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.